Hello, welcome to your academy. At your academy, today we would be dealing with Louis Althusser's theory of ideology. Louis Althusser is a 20th century Marxist theorist, Marxist critic, who lived in an age when Marxism was almost disintegrated or almost discredited as a theory, as a political theory, as an alternate for capitalism, as an alternate for democracy. So, in those times, most of the Marxist critics, whether it be Raymond Williams, whether it be Louis Althusser, or whether it be Frederick Jameson or others, who were also postmodernists in nature, tried or made attempts to defend the fundamentals of Marxism. And Louis Althusser also during his lifetime would attempt to defend the Marxism through his writing. One of the greatest contributions that Louis Althusser made to the literary theory in 20th century was through his theory of ideology. Now, he wrote about ideology extensively. He would write about the ideology of reading, about the ideology of writing, about the ideology of politics and other things. He was into this world of ideology. He, though, was not the first person to talk about ideology, but still, his ideas and concepts regarding ideology are considered as the greatest contribution in the 20th century. And today we mostly remember Louis Althusser for his theory of ideology and particularly for his two concepts, that is ideological state apparatus and repressive state apparatus. In this lecture today, we would deal with this theory of ideology and in particular with ideological state apparatus and repressive state apparatus. But before we take up ISA and RSA, it would be better to understand the concept of ideology here. Now, the theory of ideology was developed by our first, expounded by Louis Althusser in one of his essays, Marxism and Humanism in 1963, in which he would define ideology as a representation of images, ideas, and concepts, which helps us to understand our world, which helps us to understand, our way of thinking, our way of conduct, our way of talking, our way of expression. All these things are, influenced or affected by ideology. He makes two important assumptions about ideology. For example, he says that ideology constitutes the lived experiences, are the relation of the lived experiences to historical reality. So, what ideology constitutes? We would say that it constitutes our own experiences, our own way of life, our own world, which means that ideology helps us in understanding that particular world. If we can relate our experiences with a particular ideology, or if we can understand our experiences through a particular ideology, that is how we understand our world. That is how we understand our life. That is how we understand our culture, or we understand our times. But the other assumption about the ideology that Althusser makes is that it also develops an imaginary relationship to the real conditions of existence, which means that ideology is not true to us. Ideology is not always true to those who follow it, because it creates an imaginary world for us, and we try to forget our real existence, or we forget to relate ourselves to real existence, to real conditions of existence, and are happy to be in that bubble, which is imaginary, which has nothing to do with our real existence. So these are the two important aspects of ideology. One, it constitutes our lived experiences, our real experiences, and two, it also creates that imaginary world of our existence, wherein our real existence is far away from what we comprehend, are far away from our comprehension. So most of the times the focus of an individual in this capitalist world act as per the ideology of that particular time is more to the imaginary world rather than the real conditions of existence. In this manner, this ideology prevents most of the human beings from understanding their world correctly, and if they do not understand their world correctly, they are obviously going uh, to be the victims of a particular. Louis Althusser, since he was a Marxist critic, he would obviously be there making certain qualifications to Marxist ideologies. As I said earlier, that ideology is not a new concept. In the world of theory, in the world of philosophy, ideology has there been for quite some time. Even Marx, when he spoke about society, about culture in his writings, he also talked about ideology. But as I said earlier, when Louis Althusser would be dealing with this, he would be making certain qualifications to what Marx had already said, and he would incorporate a few things and make a commentary upon them or make additions upon them. When it comes to the society, our society consists of our Marxist concept or Marxist idea of society consists of primarily three stages, wherein we have a base, we have a superstructure, we have an ideology. These are the three, we would say, structures of society in Marxist understanding of culture, in Marxist understanding of society. What Louis Althusser does, he adds a fourth stage, a fourth level to this structure of society, and that fourth level would be the level of science. So what we would have, we would have base, we would have superstructure, we would have ideology, and we will also have science. And Althusser says that at any point of time in human society, in human culture, there are two prevalent discourses, and those two discourses are the discourse of science and the discourse of ideology. At other level, if you are reading Jon Paul Lyotard in the postmodern condition, he would tell you that there are, one is the scientific knowledge and the other is the narrative knowledge. So there we have narrative and science. Here we have science and ideology. These are the two discourses which are more or less same. And both these ideas or both these discourses have different functions to perform in our society. For example, the function of science, Louis Althusser, is to produce knowledge. The function of science is to produce knowledge, and the function of ideology is not to produce knowledge. That is the function of science and function of ideology. And ideology though works there in our society, but the problem with ideology is, according to Louis Althusser, that it does not produce knowledge. Rather, its function is not to produce knowledge. But still, ideology has a role to play in our society. Now, if the function of ideology is not to produce knowledge, then what is the role or function of an ideology in our society? That becomes an important question to answer. If it would not be producing knowledge, what would ideology then be doing?